All right, good morning, everyone. Chief Davis will read your question, then she will answer it, and then you will have the opportunity to give a brief follow-up to that response. Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you the Chief of Police, C.J. Davis.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. It has been 4 busy months in the city of Memphis. It has been a busy time, but it has been a time of reinvention and opportunity here in the Memphis Police Department. What I have found is, despite the challenges that we face here in the city of Memphis, Memphis is a beautiful city, a vibrant city, a city of proud residents who are proud of their history and optimistic about the future. I too am very optimistic about the future here in the city of Memphis and the commitment that the Memphis Police Department has to make our community safer. So I will jump right in and begin answering some of your questions. There have been many questions over the last several weeks, and this was a way for me to consolidate all of your questions and respond in a way that we could all be satisfied with it. So I'm going to start with ABC 24, Jenny DePrizio. And Jenny's question is, how long do you think it will take to see a measurable reduction in crime? And what will it take for that to happen? So crime reductions come about when not only the police department and police agencies bring all our resources to bear to address crime trends, but we also see greater results when crime prevention measures are enacted by community members and other stakeholders. So as I've said before, and in many community forums, we hope to engage not just our police officers in crime prevention, but also our community members, our business stakeholders, and other agencies that partner with us. Our success depends heavily on several factors as well, as it relates to gun crimes, which is a pervasive issue in the city of Memphis. The Memphis Police Department has seized more than 3,000 illegal guns this year and made over 3,000 arrests of juveniles and adults in possession of illegal guns. We have taken at least 3,800 stolen weapons reports, and approximately 55% of guns stolen come from unsecured weapons and motor vehicles. And because gun crimes and violent crime is at the very highest priority of the Memphis Police Department, we know that our work is cut out for us as we try to inform our community members about how to be responsible gun owners. So we are increasing our education and awareness campaigns to encourage responsible gun ownership. And this effort is messaging must be taken seriously. Individuals who have legal guns have to secure their weapons, not just in their vehicles, but also in their homes. Some of the incidents that have occurred as it relates to our children have not been related to thefts or gun violence because of gangs, but many of them have just been accidental shootings. So much of our work has to be approached from a holistic approach, and to ensure that we're not just arresting individuals, but we're also educating individuals in our community to prevent crime. And what we do know is that our children have more access to weapons now, as we've seen in the recent school shooting. And the source in many of these instances are weapons unsecured in homes and vehicles. So as we have entered into this new era also of permitless carry, we are encountering more instances where weapons are readily available, where people are just carrying weapons on their persons in the simplest of conflicts. And the use of firearms has increased even in domestic violence cases. Instead of arguments being simple arguments, they're turning into shootouts. And in disputes such as road rage and other disputes amongst acquaintances. So responsible gun ownership is a major factor in keeping our community safe. And the last thing I'll add to that is that we are planning to be proactive in how we address gun issues and violent crime. We have a gun buyback event scheduled for November 13th, and we'll continue to work in the communities that are most impacted to curb gun violence from a holistic approach. But from an enforcement and interdiction standpoint, we have several planned operations in partnership with our federal, state, and local partners to specifically focus on individuals involved in violent crime. And we believe that if we stay laser focused on those individuals that are what I call serial criminals, not just repeat offenders, but serial criminals, then we can see some impact. And we also have to work with our criminal justice system so that we're not just putting the most egregious individuals in jail, but they stay in jail as well. So we'll be working with our DA's office to try to ensure that we build good cases against some of the most violent offenders. And while challenged in our current staffing levels, I'm optimistic that we can strive next year for a 5% decrease in Part 1 crime. That is a goal that we plan to set for 2022, but we've already started working on how we move the needle in reducing crime in our city. So that was question number 1. And Mr. Prezio, did you have any follow-up questions?
Yeah, I guess from my perspective, I've been a reporter here for 20 years and I've seen many attempts and nothing really has changed over the years, right? I mean, it kind of goes up, it kind of goes down. So that's why my question, what's it really going to take? Like, I've heard so many versions of, we're going to do more community policing. No, we're going to not do as much community policing. We're going to do more gun buyback programs. So like, what's it going to take to finally make a real change? Because as a reporter who sat here for 20 years watching the crime problem, nothing's really changed. So that's why my question is, what really can happen to move the needle?
Well, I think your frustration is a frustration experience, and even as a new person in this city, is very frustrating to me as well. I do believe that it's going to take, and I said a holistic approach, and I didn't just mean from community policing and all the things that we can do as a police department. That holistic approach has to be the criminal justice system as well. And I think people think that we fail them when we have to address the same individuals over and over and over again. And it goes back to us, some of the statements that I've made in the past, that 20% of the people are committing 80% of the crime. And if we can work with our criminal justice partners and have some stiffer penalties for some of the most egregious crimes, when a person commits a crime against another person that's a violent act, that person should be dealt with swiftly and with appropriate consequences. So it's going to take more than just the police department arresting individuals. It's going to take the system to work from every aspect, and to also give individuals an opportunity who come back into the community some other alternatives, as opposed to trying to make a life out of crime again. So I think the wraparound services that we talk about, they have to work, and not just work for a couple of months, but they have to be consistent to help individuals who return to the community to have some type of productive life and are able to walk away from criminal activity. So I hear your frustration, and thank you for that. And so the next question is, what do I plan to do that is different from my predecessors to reduce crime in the city? Very similar question, and I think I've hit on some of it. Some of it may be the same work that has been done by previous chiefs, but every chief has a different approach to addressing crime and community concerns. We all have different backgrounds and different experiences of those programs and initiatives that have worked. And I'd like to think that some of what I'm bringing to the table is new, fresh, creative, and it engages not just my officers in a different way, but also community members. Building trust is going to be important, and not just as a cliche, but to actually work with our community members and establish relationships where they feel comfortable, talking to police officers and providing information about what's happening in their community. My approach is one that is extremely collaborative. It brings, all the resources to bear, including utilizing even some of our retired officers, which is an approach that I think will help free up some of our officers to do more of the crime fighting and responding to calls and some of the other lightweight work that our police department is still responsible for doing, like community engagement and community policing, can be handed off to a force of other individuals who have experience and knowledge and who can help build those relationships. So I plan to utilize our retired officers and reserves to help augment our work as a force multiplier in the community. Previous leaders in the Memphis Police Department did an incredible job utilizing the resources that they had. And today we're fortunate to receive federal funds to implement new and innovative initiatives that we are certain will help us to reduce crime. This is sort of a pivotal time in the Memphis Police Department that I don't know that we've ever had the amount of resources that we're receiving right now. We hope to make good of this opportunity and implement programs that have sustainable differences, sustainable changes. And so Andrew Douglas, WMCTV, in your first few months on the job as Memphis Police Chief, what changes have you implemented that have had a direct effect on reducing violent crime in Memphis? So we're still in the embryonic stages of addressing needed changes. We have worked quickly, though, on some initial initiatives. We recently stood up an auto theft task force to assist in reducing auto theft, since many of our crimes are being committed by individuals who have stolen a vehicle and committed the crime in that vehicle. This is a problem that we're finding to be quite prevalent in the city. So the Auto Theft Task Force will be specifically working to reduce auto thefts and also tracking individuals who are committing crimes in stolen vehicles. We are in the planning stages to also stand up our felony assault unit, which was funded just a month or so ago, to quickly respond to and investigate non-fatal shootings. This is important because as aggravated assaults and shootings increase, we put a lot of emphasis on homicides, but we need just as much emphasis on non-fatal shootings, because after all, an aggravated assault, persons involved in these types of non-fatal shootings are likely to be your next murderer. They're likely to be the next suspect in some drive-by shooting or some homicide. So this is a proactive way to prevent the next fatal shooting. So we plan to stand that unit up probably within the next month. We also have a new format for our weekly information sharing sessions with our violence interrupters, which is GVIP. You've probably heard a lot about the Violence Interrupter Program. We have committed to supporting them in the work that they do. Even though we don't work alongside them in the community, we provide real-time information to this program to help guide their interventions. The whole idea and the concept is that if they receive information real-time about an incident, they can help prevent other consequences or other fatalities or even shootings that could be a result of the initial incident. So we are working with GVIP as well. We've implemented a test pilot to eliminate our Delta shift. Our Delta shift is one of the 4 shifts that we have where officers are assigned to what we call a watch. If we eliminate the Delta shift, that takes those officers and it adds them to put them in areas and times of day and night that we need them the most. So it sort of supplements the two other shifts that work nights and evenings, so that there are more officers on the street responding to calls for service, conducting directed patrols, discretionary types of activities that are important to us, reducing crime and placing visibility where we need it. So eliminating the Delta shift right now is currently in 2 precincts. And if this pilot works well for us, then we plan to implement this same type of scheduling throughout the department as a way to maximize our manpower. We also have modified our CompStat process, and CompStat, you might be familiar with that terminology, is our weekly crime fighting forum where all our leaders in the Memphis Police Department come together. It's known as TRAC, Blue Crush, to sort of facilitate a more robust data and intelligence analysis, develop strategies that address crime real time. This is more of a problem-oriented policing approach, a more results-driven approach, and crime-fighting tactics that centers on actions and accountability. So we've also begun looking at our camera installations and expanding our camera network. That intelligence information and the utilization of video footage when crimes are being committed will help us to solve crimes and arrest individuals as well. So we're looking at expanding not just the cameras that the city owns, but also expanding our camera network into private sector cameras, exterior cameras on businesses as well, and also license plate readers to identify stolen vehicles. So I hope that sort of hit some of the initial work that has been going on in the Memphis Police Department. So violent crime amongst juveniles is at a record high. Recently, Shelby County Schools announced they are bringing on former MPD Chief Tony Armstrong to make Shelby County schools safer. How are we confronting violence involving juveniles in Memphis, and how are we working with the school system to reach at-risk juveniles? So I'm always personally committed to finding solutions for at-risk youth. We'll continue to work closely with the schools to help educate our youth about anti-violence and gang activity. We have the DARE program, which is drug abuse resistance, and also our GREAT program. We will continue to educate in the school systems. I met with Superintendent Ray to discuss school safety and fully support any work that retired Director Armstrong, who's a personal friend, and the Shelby County Schools Public Safety Director is involved in. And as you know, the Shelby County Sheriff's Department has an intimate relationship with the school system because they have SROs there. So we will continue to work with the school system and the Sheriff's Department and trying to make our schools safe. So Adrian Sands, are we with Memphis CIT? How are we with the Memphis CIT program, and what do I think about it? Well, I'm a supporter of CIT. It's a hallmark of the Memphis Police Department. I had that program in my previous work. It's a program that is very beneficial for officers. And in the previous department, I actually incorporated CIT in the basic training program for all officers as they came on the police department. And we're looking at potentially implementing CIT training at some point here in the Memphis Police Department as part of basic training as well. So I have a question here also about the fact that we want a Hispanic liaison here in the Memphis Police Department and how we communicate with the Hispanic community. And what's the status on that process? Yes, I did mention early on that I thought we needed a full-time Hispanic liaison. We're in the process of interviewing individuals that are interested. It does require a person that is fluent in Spanish and preferably someone from the Hispanic community. And this will be a full-time job for that person. Many times our Hispanic community members are targeted because of their language barriers. And we plan to work really, really closely with our Hispanic community through our new Hispanic liaison, and that should happen within the next month. So Fox 13, how would violence interrupters reduce crime in Memphis? I mentioned it a little bit earlier. Violence interrupters are individuals working as community stakeholders, and they're uniquely familiar with the various communities that they serve in those neighborhoods, and they seek to quickly intervene during the onset of potential community violence and use their mediation skills to prevent further violence. So we're really looking forward to seeing the results of violence interrupters. And the other question was, how do we choose people? That program is not under the umbrella of the Memphis Police Department. It is a separate entity, and the group has a city-appointed director who leads the program and selects those individuals. So what are my thoughts on Superintendent Ray's recent announcement that the district is re-exploring the possibility of replacing commissioned officers with its own school peace force? And as I mentioned before, the MPD, we don't have a contract with the school system. However, as we continue conversations with the superintendent, we are certainly supportive of any type of new initiatives that could help support, safety, public safety in our schools. Oftentimes, things that happen in the neighborhood spill over to the classrooms and school hallways. This is another question. What steps is MPD taking, or does it plan to take in the future to better inform principals, teachers, and other school staff members about neighborhood crime developments? So while we strive to ensure timely and relevant information is provided to our schools, to all of our local schools regarding potential threats or safety to our children, we will nevertheless evaluate our communications protocols. I'm new here, and I'm hoping to make sure that we have communications protocols that help intercept any potential violence in the schools. And that would be, planning and having discussions with the public safety director in the school system, along with Director Ray or Superintendent Ray, and also our sheriff, so that anytime there's a potential threat, we communicate to our officials in a timely fashion to prevent any type of crisis. So commercial appeal, any significant departmental policy changes under my leadership so far. We're still in the early stages of evaluating MPD's policies. At some point, we will be evaluating, and of course, as a best practice, we're always evaluating our policies. However, as a nationally accredited organization, we follow industry best practice, and we have to, in order to maintain that accreditation. There have been modifications to the hiring guidelines, I know, trying to streamline it because we're short of officers, and streamlining the hiring process, not compromising the hiring process, but streamlining it and eliminating sort of dated requirements has been beneficial for us. There will likely be additional policy additions and modifications in coming months related to new community engagement programs. Mentioned the Hispanic liaison, LGBTQ liaison, and utilization of our retirees and crime suppression efforts. I'm sorry. I'm trying to hurry up so that I'm good of time here and get to everybody's questions. Specific traffic enforcement under Slowdown Tennessee, a robust increase on the interstate, and more traffic enforcement of speeding, drag racing, and counterfeit tags on city streets is one of our priorities as well. It's my goal to eventually stand up a permanent interstate traffic presence in Memphis, which is critically needed. So MLK 50, Jacob Steimer. Are we trying to shift more resources to addressing root causes of crime prevention? I sort of mentioned that in the holistic conversation. And if so, how specifically are we doing that? So partnering with our interim U.S. Attorney General, Joe Murphy, as is a start with his Better Communities initiative. And we plan to expand our community outreach program to take a more proactive and preventative approach to youth violence as well, utilizing all kinds of community proactive programs for our young people. At this time, I'm going to turn it over to Sergeant Brownlee.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take a pause for the moment. We're going to send a new link out so you can jump back on so we can finish this conversation, our Q&A with Chief Davis. Thanks for joining us again. Sorry for the technical difficulties. Here's Chief Davis again.
So thank you all for that brief interruption. I think what I'm going to do is just back up. I sort of rushed through. I saw that we were having some technical problems. So I'm going to go back to MLK 50, Jacob Steimer. And this question is really asking, are we trying to shift more resources to addressing root causes and crime prevention? And we absolutely will be looking at how we can better support crime prevention, in our work every day. And a lot of that has to do with education and collaboration, not just, with our community members, but also, federal partners. There's so much work that's being done in the community, but a lot of what's happening sometimes happens in silos. But fortunately, I mentioned it earlier that we are partnering with our interim U.S. Attorney General, Joe Murphy, and clergy members and community leaders as a start with his Better Communities initiative. And this Better Communities initiative will address a myriad of social issues that contribute to community violence. So these are the types of forums, educational forums that will be held in the community where, community members are being impacted the most. So this particular event will occur in November, and there will be at least 4 or 5 to follow in other communities involving other clergy and bringing in members of the community to be provided with wraparound services and information on prevention, gun violence, and a myriad of presentations. We plan to expand our community outreach programs to take a more proactive and preventive approach to youth violence. So even though our police department is challenged with staffing, we do have community outreach officers. And instead of one unit, we plan to expand our unit so that we can reach other communities, especially as it relates to, helping our youth have alternatives to, violence and gang activity and just hanging out, finding productive ways for them to spend their time, be educated, and also work with civic organizations and partnering so that we can collaborate on that type of work. I do believe that an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. So we plan to expand our Citizens Police Academy and expanding our Citizens Police Academy also to our Hispanic community members, our non-English speaking members, because many times, as I mentioned before, they become crime victims as well. So next question is, look ahead 2 years. I'm still the chief. What can the people of Memphis hold MPD accountable for? Well, I can say that we will be accountable for 100% effort in what the community expects from us, and more community engagement, not just from myself, because I am a hands-on type of leader, but they can expect to see more of our leaders in the community, more of our officers getting out of their cars, because I'm a firm believer that community engagement is not just a cliche, or community policing is not just a cliche. It has to be baked into the police department. It has to be part of our performance metrics and evaluations. And I believe that this shift is going to be important to reducing crime. Making arrests and numerous arrests isn't enough. Preventing crime is going to be key. So that has to come through engagement. And also to speak a little bit more about the next couple of years, really, we are working on a 3 to 5 year strategic plan. And it focuses on 6 goals, 6 key areas. The first is crime prevention or crime reduction, community engagement, reimagining policing recommendations. This is work that has already been done that we plan to implement the recommendations that have been put forward by the Reimagining Policing Task Force. The next one is organizational effectiveness. How do we do our work? How do we do it smarter? How do we incorporate various new processes and procedures and enhance technology? These are just a few of our strategic goals, and they will have several initiatives that fall under each one of those strategic goals, to include starting a leadership academy for our officers and commanders. It'll also include how effective we are as an organization. How do we communicate better to the community? How do we utilize various means of communicating effectively? So my next question is Jessica Gertler. Should the citizens of Memphis feel safe? Why or why not? I say yes, they should feel safe, because every day our officers, the men and women of the Memphis Police Department, are out there and they're dedicated to making significant progress in crime reduction in the city and in our crime reduction efforts. Unfortunately, the frustration is sometimes arresting the same offenders over and over again, but our officers are relentless and they have done exceptionally well. I gave you stats about the numbers of violent crime arrests, the numbers of guns, not just guns, but also drugs that they've apprehended off the streets and seized off of the streets, and they continue to do that. It's a busy time, not just in the city of Memphis, but around the country. I know you all have been paying attention that there are some very unique challenges and nuances as it relates to crime in this current environment, in this COVID environment, and many chiefs are being challenged. But I say yes, citizens should feel safe, but I do say that we all have to be responsible for our own personal safety, and that, you know, part of the education that I'm talking about and that we provide here in the police department really hones in on how can we be safer as community members. How do we keep our homes safe? How do we, adjust the manner in which we move about in the city so that we can be safe? So we currently have the most robust recruitment and retention campaign that's going on. We know that we need more officers, and we know that people feel safer when they see a police presence, even if it's a soft presence. It doesn't have to be an enforcement operation, but just having officers in the neighborhood in a very community-friendly manner is important to safety. So we hope that this campaign will benefit us in the next year as we try to hit our goal of hiring 300 officers by 2023. We have new hiring incentives in place, such as a $15,000 signing bonus, something that's sort of unheard of, that I haven't seen in my career, but we have already seen a significant increase in applications received because of these various incentives that are being afforded. Our mayor and our elected officials and city leaders are all committed to supporting the Memphis Police Department in our efforts to make Memphis a safe place to live, work, and enjoy the great entertainment here. So I say yes, citizens should feel safe in the city of Memphis. So the Daily Memphian, well, before I move on, I want to go back. Was there any other follow-ups? I know we got cut off and I tried to rush through. Any other follow-ups from the previous questions that I responded to. Okay, Inez?
Hi, Chief. How are you doing
Oh,
today?
Inez, how are you?
I'm doing good. Well, thank you so much for your response. And I really appreciate the fact that you are really aware of the extra barriers immigrants are facing in a city like Memphis.
Yes,
It's a city that is not prepared to address the needs, and it's a community that is extremely vulnerable.
yes,
And Casa Luz is the only nonprofit organization culturally specific working only for Hispanic victims of violence crime. Like you say, we have been target of violent crimes and not everything go into the news because it's a community that everybody want to put under the table. I really appreciate you doing the effort after we met last time about hiring a or assign it or appointed, I don't know how you say it, a Hispanic liaison that is full-time, and please be sure that it's fully bilingual because that's another issue. I appreciate the fact that you are implementing the Citizen Academy in Spanish. It's a way to make the community to come forward. It's a community that is extremely scared and afraid of MPD based on the experience. And that is something that I know that I shouldn't address in this meeting today, but for another meeting that I'm planning on having with you later on, I will address more directly. But thank you so much for your support. We had been needing that acknowledgement of what we're dealing with, and we didn't have that before. So I really appreciate it in representation of the community. Thank you.
thank you, Inez. I do understand fully how vulnerable our Hispanic communities are. And in my previous work, it's going to take some time to build that trust, but I plan to reach out not just to you, but to other individuals in the community who can help us with forums to help communicate the positive relationship that we can build, especially as we educate our Hispanic community members so that they can also feel like they're a part of our community and that we have their best interests at heart. And recently we have had, Hispanic community members that have been victimized. And sometimes there's a sense of fear of calling the police. So this process of interviewing and ensuring that we identify the right person is important, not just that the person is bilingual, but this is a person that comes from the Hispanic community and is concerned about education and prevention in the Hispanic community. Thank you so much.
Michaela Watts from the Commercial Appeal.
Michaela Watts from the Commercial Appeal.
Yes, good morning, Chief Davis. I wanted to ask you a more specific follow-up question as it pertains to Operation Slowdown Tennessee and in general, just traffic enforcement in Memphis. I wondered if under your guidance, if we can expect to see a reduced amount of traffic stops for things that aren't, moving violations that endanger others, right? So like broken tail lights, expired tags. So I wanted to know if we would see a reduction in those types of stops and a more concentrated enforcement in problematic areas of town that are known for absolutely bananas driving. Thank you.
Thank you for that. And bananas driving is absolutely correct. We are mostly concerned about erratic driving, reckless driving, and really that's all over the city. It's not all over just Memphis. It bleeds over into some of the other counties as well. But the drag racing and the various types of maneuvers and wheelies and all of that that we see on our street is extremely dangerous for the individuals who are in the cars and also for other innocent bystanders. I will say that Memphis has a serious problem with counterfeit tags. And what we are finding about counterfeit tags is many of the counterfeit tags are on stolen vehicles. And it's a way to hide the stolen vehicles. But at the same time, what we're trying to do is train our officers and have individuals that work in the tags offices to help us to identify what a counterfeit tag looks like and what a real drive out tag is supposed to look like. And we get all kinds of complaints about speeding, not just on our freeways, but just on, our city streets. So there will be increased enforcement as it relates to the erratic driving on our city streets, but it won't be targeted towards, broken tail lights. There is no inspection process on vehicles in the city of Memphis. So we have really no concerns, at this point for individual vehicles that don't pass inspection. It's not on our radar. Unless a vehicle is a highly hazardous vehicle on the road and has no lights, I think that might be a concern, especially at nighttime. But to answer your question, we don't plan to target individuals for minor types of, infractions. We have some very, very serious traffic issues in the city of Memphis, and that's what our focus will be.
Next, we have Valerie Calhoun with Fox 13. Follow-up question.
There we go. Thank you so much. This is Valerie Calhoun. We talked about violence interrupters. I know it's a city program. One of the questions we had, you knew what you were getting into when you accepted this job. Memphis has a crime problem, but are you surprised at the level of violence you've seen so far?
I would say not surprised. I think what I am, but not surprised at the level. I think what I am surprised at is the nature of various types of incidents. I hit on it a little bit earlier, that gun violence is the result of some of the simplest arguments. Two family members fighting over a cell phone, two individuals arguing about a parking space, road rage, and gun violence being the result of someone jumping or cutting in front of another individual. I think not just here in the city of Memphis, this is playing out around the country. It is very personal to us here, but my colleagues, in other cities are seeing the exact same types of outbursts and the use of weapons and the affinity to have guns and the easy access to have guns is a whole new phenomenon. And it's really different here in Tennessee, as we now have permitless carry, which really, causes us to retrain our officers on how we approach individuals that could potentially be thinking about committing a violent act. Our approach is very measured at this point. I hope that helped answer your question.
Thanks, Jeff.
Yes, I think it did. In the violence interrupters, are you seeing any difference? I know 4 months ago, the mayor was saying they hope to have 25. Are we seeing a difference?
I think they have just recently finished some of the training phases that they're going. We just really started regular reporting for them about a month ago. So I think it may take a little bit of time, Ms. Glover, for us to really see what that result looks like, what their performance metrics will look like as well. I sincerely hope that we see some positive results. I'm supportive of them. I feel like any effort to intervene a potential violent act, is help towards a better place here in Memphis.
Next, we have Jessica Gertler, WREG.
Good morning, Chief. Thanks so much for talking with us. So first of all, I had a follow-up to the first question you asked. And then secondly, I never got my second question answered, so I want to ask that. But we'll start with the follow-up. For you, when you've been here, what, more than 100 days now?
Yeah.
So when you are not in uniform and you're
Yeah.
walking around Memphis, do you feel safe? Why or why not?
And I think I was thinking about that when you asked that question. I took myself out of the uniform and wanted to respond honestly about how I feel. And I sort of hit on it, that feeling safe has a lot to do with how we, carry ourselves as well. And I think we're in a whole different era in our communities. Like I said, not just here, but you can't walk down the street with your head in a cloud anymore. I operate totally different than I used to, because safety for me means to pay attention. Safety for me means to make sure that my lights are on at the house, that I can see, that I call someone before, I get out of a car in a parking garage. And that's unfortunate that that's the place that we're in. But I want our citizens to feel safe. But at the same time, there's certain elements that are out of the control of the police department. And we have to educate and help our officers to, not our officers, but our community members to help us help them. So we are doing assessments like community policing through environmental design, going to community members' homes and helping them to evaluate their homes so that they can feel safe. No, ambient light is not good. You need brighter lights. No, you shouldn't leave your car running in the driveway because somebody might steal it. You shouldn't leave your screen door open even though the weather is nice. But these are the kind of things that continue to go on, and we want our community members to feel safe, but we have to educate and adjust to this new environment. And I don't know that things will go back to the way they used to be, unfortunately.
Just a second question.
Second question, Jessica, was there another one?
Yes, sorry, it wasn't letting me unmute. Okay, so I'd asked, my question was, what major changes can we expect in the future? And I know you touched on that with your 3 to 5 year strategic plan. So, and I know that you said that we're going to have initiatives that fall under each one of these steps. So will any of those steps include changes in the way that you handle excessive force complaints?
Yes, and actually, through the reimagining policing work, we plan to not just evaluate our, various excessive force complaints. We also plan to make sure that there's triggers in place for early warning, how we respond to not just excessive force, but just courtesy complaints. Identifying individuals that may have patterns of courtesy. If someone complains on an officer 4 times that they were discourteous, and it's that officer's word against mine, there should be some type of corrective measure put in place for training or whatever the case might be, because chances are that officer is probably discourteous. So there will be measures put in place for early warning, for corrective actions. And I also plan to really look at what a disciplinary matrix looks like so that we can have consistency in our disciplinary processes.
Okay. A question from Andrew Douglas, WMC TV 5.
Yes, good morning, Chief Davis. And I want to follow up on one of my questions that you read out earlier. It has to deal with violent crime among juveniles. And you mentioned a lot about some of the efforts involved in school, but what sort of programs and efforts are in place outside of school to help juveniles who are at risk in our community? Are there any efforts to really kind of target those juveniles and get them away from this criminal behavior and activity that we are seeing in our community?
Yes. Well, of course, during my probably first couple of weeks, I met with the juvenile court judges, all of them, and the chief juvenile court judge. And we talked a lot about what wraparound services look like, what diversion services look like, and how from a policy standpoint, eventually, how do we ensure that our officers are providing interventions and services to young people, especially those young people who are first-time offenders? Of course, the court system does that too. But the other program is the Youth Assessment Center. And we have great optimism about the Youth Assessment Center because they will take in young people that are at risk for juvenile types of crimes and actually provide wraparound services, work with parents. And a lot of those referrals will come from the police department working hand in hand with the Youth Assessment Center. So I'm very optimistic about that program and their facility. And I plan to meet with their director again. We've met twice, but we plan to meet again so that we can talk about how our policies can help guide some of those referrals of our young people.
Last question, Yolanda Jones.
Okay. Okay, Yolanda Jones, your question is in reference to the 100 days on the job, and Decarcerate Memphis sent us 10 demands regarding police reforms. And have we addressed these concerns with the group and or accomplished any of the demands they listed? Yes, I've met with them and had a very, I think, positive discussion, and it yielded productive results too, because many of the 10 that were listed were clarified in that conversation and addressed with greater clarity and understanding during the meeting. However, we continue to evaluate the Memphis Police Department's internal affairs processes, which was hit on here earlier, and our early warning system as we seek to model national best practices. The internal affairs process was one of the issues that they brought up, and also our relationship or our ability to work with CLERB, the Citizens Law Enforcement Review Board, which I totally support. And I also plan to meet with them in the very near future. I think I have a meeting with them on my schedule. And CLERB will advance our efforts towards fair and impartial policing and transparency in our police department. And all of these initiatives that have been brought out, most of them are aligned with the Reimagining Policing document that we're rolling out. Okay, that's it.
Yolanda, do you have a follow-up question?
Yeah, I wanted to find out, when you talked about the Delta shift being eliminated, can you talk about that? At which 2 precincts you're eliminating? You're going to have that pilot program with eliminating the Delta shift and the impact on the community and for the police officers.
So the 2 precincts is Appling Farms and Ridgeway Station. So that initiative is really to take officers that are assigned to sort of like an overlapping shift and put them all on the evening shift and our sort of night shift. That's when we get most of our call volume. Those shifts are the busiest shifts. So we took 2 precincts to try this out and sort of populate our busiest times of day and days of week with these officers. And it's only been in effect probably the last 7 days, if I'm correct. I believe about 7 days. But after sitting down and discussing our shortages and looking at the department and trying to maximize our manpower and respond, and not just respond to calls for service, but respond in a timely way, we feel like eliminating that shift, that Delta shift, will help us to have better response time and support on various types of serious calls.
So that ends our Q&A session with Chief Davis. We thank everyone for participating. Have a great day.
Thank you, everyone.